Hello there, my name is Kay Byfield, and this is your ArtSpeaks Studio moment from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas, where we offer classes in art. Today I'm going to talk about how to finish a painting. Finishing a painting is very challenging to everyone. For one thing, you never know when it's really done. There's always more adjustments that can be made. But the other is that many of us are really a little bit challenged by the whole idea of getting close to finishing a painting. And this is because as we paint, we're making choices. And every time you make a choice, you are closing some possibilities. And typically what happens is as you paint, you realize that some of the choices that you made earlier on might not really be what you wanted to do. The problem is that people begin judging the painting while they are in a very unfinished state. And so by about halfway through, it's easy to get discouraged and give up on the painting rather than seeing it through and getting it finished. I recommend that you don't do that. I recommend that you stay with your painting, give it a chance to see how it's all going to come together. The reason for that is because it's impossible to judge whether something is too dark or too light, or too bright or too dull, or any of the other relative features unless you have all the other elements under control. So for instance, if something seems to be too dark, it could be that it's just next to a white or a light surface that you intend to cover and make darker later on, and in which case it wouldn't be dark at all. I try not to judge my artwork at all in the early phases of painting. I wait until the surface is completely covered, and then I begin to look at how things work relatively speaking and make adjustments at that point. It's okay to say, gee, I think I need that dress to be a brighter red, and think about putting some kind of a dull green next to it so that it pushes it forward or something like that as you're in process. But the idea of scrapping a painting before you've reached a point of resolution and adjustment seems to me to be very premature and wasteful. I've had experience, and most of the other artists I know have had the experience where you think a painting is a failure, you put it in the scrap heap, or you put it aside, and you look at it at some later point and go, oh my gosh, I know what to do to save that painting. And sometimes the fact that you struggled with it will even make it stronger. So I recommend that you come up with an approach where you do not judge a painting too soon. This last weekend, I taught a workshop for beginner painters, and I did a demo to show them how I would approach a painting, what the process would be. So in this case, I had as my reference a photograph of a golden poppy, and I like the composition pretty well. I was drawn to it because of the high contrast between the yellow, orange of the poppy and the greens in the background. As I often do, I did a study. In this case, it was a value study to think about the shapes and the values and make sure that everything was working well. And I wanted the students to understand that doing your homework and doing a value study is a really important part of doing a painting, because it's less important about the color relationships than it is about the value relationships. In this case, I didn't have to deviate very much from what the original photograph showed. So this is the painting as I finished the demo in the class, and I'm relatively pleased with it. I don't think that it needs a lot of adjustment, but I think it does need a little bit. I think that it would be helpful to add a little bit more bright color into the light areas of the flower itself. I think I can get even darker inside the shadow shapes in the flower, and I definitely need to pull out some even darker areas around the flower to push it forward more in keeping with what the photograph suggested. So I'm going to do that now and show you what I did as I finished it. Okay, so to finish the painting, I punched up the brights a little bit, made them a little bit brighter. I went in and pushed the darks a little bit darker, and I made sure that you could travel around the painting in the darks and in the brights to come up with something that seemed to work a little bit better. I don't care if it matches the photograph. I don't owe that photograph anything. The photograph is just a reference. It's something to start from. I was reasonably pleased with that photograph, but if I weren't, I would just make changes in it and not worry about it. So this is another painting that I did some years ago, talking about adjusting paintings. I did this after a trip to Laos, and one of the things that is quite traditional in Laos is for the monks every morning to go out and beg for their food among the members of the community. And so I went out there along with all the other tourists to watch this cultural activity go on. I took some photographs. I stood in the crowd and gawked at the people. But I felt like an intruder. I felt like it wasn't my place. I felt kind of not good about the whole thing. But I like to paint people. I like the colors of the orange robes against the greens of the foliage and so forth. I'm very interested in people and how they live. And so I went ahead and painted it anyway, even despite my misgivings about the whole thing. But I put the tourists in behind it. Unfortunately, I was using a lot of different photographs from different sources and putting them together. And I think there's some real issues with the drawing. It isn't holding together very well. And I don't think my figures in the background were working very well. So I finished the painting and I looked at it and I thought, it's just not there. And then I realized I needed to push those figures in the background back. So I put a wash over everything there to make it duller, move it back into the background. I still don't think it works, but it was better than it was before. So my point is, sometimes you can adjust and it can make it better, but it could still leave you with less than what you had hoped to accomplish. I don't imagine painting this again, and I thought I would show you a painting that I don't consider a huge success, but I did improve it by making the adjustments after the painting was finished. So my advice is that as you do a painting, suspend your judgment if at all possible until you've got the painting covered. Then look at it, see where it seems to need adjusting. It needs darker, it needs brighter, it needs a shape to be changed, and you lift something out or you add something in. And see if you can make it so that it moves the eye around the surface and has more interest. If you still, and what I typically do is that once I think the painting might be finished, I take a photograph of it. I also, while I'm working on a painting and as I'm finishing it, I set it up underneath the television where I can see it as I walk by and as I watch TV during the day. And sometimes it'll sit there for weeks, sometimes it'll only be a few days. And then I can look at it in a mirror and see if it works in reverse just as well as it does in the original. And then I will know where the adjustments are. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thoughtfulness to actually resolve the painting. And when I do, then I will be more satisfied with what I come out with. I hope this bit of information is useful to you. And until the next time, happy painting.